We have to have a super serious conversation about vaccines right now, guys, because this is getting out of hand. This is getting ridiculous. The amount of people I am seeing beat other people over the head because they have questions about vaccines is just absolute insanity to me. They're taking a vaccine that's 95% effective based on the company Pfizer's measure, and they're saying, how dare you? How dare you question this thing that we're asking you to inject into your body when it's 95% effective? This could save the world, guys. You're going to save everybody in my family if you take that vaccine. If you don't take the vaccine and somebody dies, it's your fault. That's what they're saying right now. They're going crazy. They are going batshit crazy. Now, I know what's going to happen. There's going to be a ton of people who jump into the comments on this video and they say, Rob, how dare you? How dare you utter the word vaccine when you're not a doctor? How dare you? How dare you talk about high school math statistics when you're not a doctor, a virologist, or an epidemiologist? How dare you do that? You're doing harm to the cause. You're hurting the world because you're talking about this stuff. And I'm actually going to make the opposite argument to these people. What I'm going to say is everything I'm about to talk about is readily available to you. It's already been processed by the experts. Experts have done these studies, have formed these statistics, have given us all these measures to read and interpret. And what you're saying to me is, I need another layer of experts to take that information and now tell me what I'm supposed to think of it. Now that's stupid. That's really dumb. If you think that, if you think we need another layer or even a second layer of experts to take the stuff that's already been developed by experts and interpret it for us and tell us what to think about it, I'd argue you're the moron in society. It might be a sign there's something wrong with you. It might be a sign you're not nearly as intelligent as you think you are. Just something to think about. Something to think about. In fact, I would argue you're one of the main reasons we are where we are in society. We've got almost a whole generation who doesn't want to think for themselves, who's super susceptible to government overreach. Why? Because they got people like you telling them not to think. That's why. They've got people like you telling them not to research, telling them not to form their own opinions, telling them they're evil if they do that. So stop it, please. Stop doing that. For the sake of my children, for the sake of your children, for the sake of the world, stop doing that. If you can read and do math, you're fine. You can understand this stuff. It's not complex. Now, getting into the vaccine conversation, there's a few terms you need to be aware of. They're very simple terms. I'm going to explain them as quickly and as simply as humanly possible. The first term, relative risk reduction, the most inaccurate measure of the effectiveness of a treatment or a vaccine, okay? Very, very inaccurate, but it gives you the most sensational result, and it sells drugs, and that's why they use it. They use the most inaccurate measure to sell you on something and make you think it's super effective when it's not. Relative risk reduction. Then we've got the next one, absolute risk reduction. That's the granddaddy. That's the accurate one. That's the one that tells you really how effective something is. But guess what? Nobody uses it. Why? Because the numbers are way lower with absolute risk reduction. You sell way less stuff, but it has the most integrity, it's the most honest, and it's the most accurate way of measuring something. Now, the best way to explain relative risk reduction versus absolute risk reduction, the best way I've seen is this. Let's say you're afraid to fly on a plane because you might get into a plane crash. And somebody speaks up and says, hey you, I know how you can reduce your risk of being in a plane crash by 99.99%. Sounds pretty cool, right? They say, stop flying on planes, and you're 99.99% less likely to die in a plane crash. Now, the little 0.01%, that's in case a plane crashes into you when you're on the highway or something, okay? So there's a small chance of that, but 99.99% less likely to die in a plane crash if you don't fly on planes. That's relative risk reduction. But that's not accurate. There's a whole bunch of context missing there, right? I mean, how likely are you to die in a plane crash in the first place? They're not going to tell you that there's a 0.00009% chance that you will die in a plane crash if you fly in planes all the time. They're not going to tell you that because that number's super small and it doesn't sell it. So what they're actually saying, when you're 99.99 less likely to die in a plane crash if you don't fly planes, is they've reduced that 0.000009% by 99.9%. You were so unlikely to die in a plane crash to begin with. Who cares? It's bullshit that you're scared of plane crashes. Let's put it that way. Now, the third term that's really important is number needed to vaccinate. And that tells you how many people need to receive a vaccine to prevent a single infection in the population. So let's put it this way. If that number's really high, then your vaccine sucks. If it's really low, then you got a good vaccine, okay? Real simple terms. Now, getting into the COVID conversation, I think this is really important. Now, I want to point out, I am going to go with Pfizer when I break down the numbers for the vaccines. The reason I'm going to go with Pfizer is it's rated as being the most effective at 95% effective. Now, I'm not going to do what they do. I'm going to go for the hard numbers here. I'm not going to try to sell you on some of the junk vaccines that are out there. I'm going right to the top. The most effective vaccine on the market right now, Pfizer. 95% effective, okay? Now, I'm going to break down for you how Pfizer actually determined their vaccine was 95% effective. And I think you're going to get a chuckle out of this. So they took 44,000 people, broke them up into two groups of 22,000. They vaccinated one group, and they gave the other group a vaccine placebo. So they weren't actually vaccinated. Through the study, they found that 170 people out of 44,000 contracted COVID. Of those 170 people, only 8 of them were vaccinated people. So I know what you'll say, that's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, you know, in that comparison, in that context, only 8 were vaccinated and the rest were unvaccinated. Well, obviously it's horrible to be unvaccinated. Here's the problem with the study. It was all self-reporting. They actually had to report a symptom and then get a positive COVID test before they were considered to be an actual case of COVID. This didn't consider asymptomatic cases. This was not a representation of how much COVID there is versus how effective the vaccines are. You can say, loosely, the vaccine is 95% effective in that light. But think about this for a minute. They did a study with 44,000 people. They had a sampling of 170 people who contracted the virus. And they stuck their thumb in the air and said because only 8 of them were vaccinated, this vaccine is 95% effective, and that's the narrative they've used to jam this down the throat of every human being on the face of the planet right now. In what world does that fly? In what world is that an accurate study that depicts anything? You can't draw conclusions from a simple study like that. Think about it. They told us, based on the study, the vaccine is effective for 95% of 170 people who got infected out of a population of 44,000. Weird, right? That's crazy. That's insanity. I would take nothing. I would put nothing in my body based on a study like that. What that study did tell us was actually some interesting things if you look at the other side of it. So in a population of 44,000 people, based on their own study, only 0.398% of them got sick with COVID through the entire study. That's a big deal. I think that's a big deal. And there were barely any negative outcomes. People just got sick and then got better. That was it. That's what their study told us. Kind of weird, eh? That study told us more about how not lethal COVID was than how the vaccine was, if you really think about it. Now, The Lancet, one of the world's leading medical journals, they came out with their own study. This is peer-reviewed, by the way. This is a legit study. And they actually ran the numbers to figure out what the absolute risk reduction was of using the Pfizer vaccine. And what they found was it's far from 95% when you look at actual risk reduction. When you look at all of these factors, they actually found, and the link to the study is right here, that vaccine is roughly 1% effective. Yet the company's selling us on 95%. The Lancet, legit source, everybody asks for sources, everybody says follow the science, they say 1%. Now let's be clear, I think a lot of vaccines are this ineffective. I think a lot of vaccines are sold this way. I don't think it was just COVID. one thing I do find funny, and I'm just going to kind of chuck this out there to you guys. If we're in a pandemic and we're thinking of the best way to quantify the effectiveness of a vaccine, why would we use the measure that sells the most? Why would we do that? Why would we use the measure that gives you the least accuracy but sells the most product instead of using the true number, which is the absolute risk reduction? I know, weird question. I just don't understand why we would do that. If this is a true emergency, if this is a true pandemic, why would we not go for the most accurate, the most honest measure of the effectiveness of a vaccine? I know, silly question, isn't it? Now here's the other thing about this Pfizer vaccine that they're not telling you that I found very interesting, and this was also in the Lancet study. So I mentioned earlier the number needed to vaccinate, right? I told you if that number's really high, I'm not sure that that's a very effective vaccine. But if it's low, good job. That's probably a pretty good vaccine you got. It turns out with Pfizer, if your aim is to prevent one case of COVID, you need to vaccinate 119 people. Pretty big number when you compare it to influenza. The influenza vaccine runs anywhere from 12 people vaccinated to prevent one illness to 37 people vaccinated to prevent one illness. So we're looking at 3 to 10 times as many people need to be vaccinated with Pfizer to prevent one COVID infection than the influenza vaccine. Does that sound really effective to you? Doesn't sound really effective to me. Now, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just giving you facts. I'm giving you readily available information. I'm summarizing it for you in my own words. You can go read this stuff yourself. I'll add all the links. All the links will be above this video so you can look at them. Okay? You can read up on this on your own. The point of this whole chat being, if you're one of these people who's attacking everybody who is having thoughts about this vaccine, who's attacking everybody who says, I'm not sure I'm ready for this vaccine, who's attacking everybody who's just like, I'm not in the age group that's at risk, why should I take the vaccine? You're not doing anybody any justice. These people are being thoughtful, they're being considerate, and it's obvious if you're going around pounding the drum that this thing's 95% effective, therefore everybody should take it, you're the one who's ill-informed. Not the people who are looking out for their well-being, not the people who are hesitant to take something that the government is jamming down our throats that hasn't been tested, that would meet no medical standards if it went through the right rigorous process. They're not the crazy ones. You are.